my wife's wearing a shirt. I've organised a series of images with some minimal text, and I'll work through it, and hopefully by the end of the presentation you'll understand this idea about the concept for a keeper. What we're experiencing in Australia at the moment is an interesting time for my wife and I and my daughter. We've come away just to get a bit of freedom from the traffic of Facebook and so on and so on. The issue around a referendum for a voice to Parliament is very important. It's central to the concept of a keeper. A keeper is much more than just a ceremony or a performance or a festival. It is at the heart of it, the idea of intellectual conversation and sharing of ideas. So I'm going to run through the images, and I just hit return to it. Okay, so the idea of a keeper was first conceived with my colleagues at the Volunteer Institute. We said we wanted a way to engage with our faculty in the university in a way that allowed us to take absolute carriage of the event. During the day, we had a series of things happening. People were weaving, somebody made a bark canoe. We had conversations with other colleagues and other faculties about the way in which we might frame or talk about the position of First People in the university. Interestingly, our VC came along and thought the thing was great until I think there was some challenges around some of the conversations that were also being held elsewhere within the university. So to some degree, our little conversation, there was a potential for it to be hijacked into something else. So we took that back and moved through it. But let me first give you some idea of my sense of cultural placing. This is an image of a river system about 5 hours north of Sydney. It's called the Macleay Valley. It's the place in which I call home, my cultural home at the very least. I now live in Newcastle, obviously, but this is where I draw most of my sense of leadership and growth, and so I'll move through that and give you some idea of this. The image here is of my father, Raymond Kelly, and Harry Creamer, who was, they were brought together for the establishment of the National Parks and Wildlife Service in New South Wales. What we have here were a range of other anthropologists and the likes who were archaeologists who were gathered on country here, talking about the new place of cultural heritage in New South Wales. And so Raymond Lewis and Harry became very important in this change of sense of what is culture in New South Wales. I've got my sequences out of, images out of sequence, so I'm going to keep talking real quickly. What they were trying to move through was to gather the last of the sense that the last of the speakers, the last of the knowledge holders. Now, in fact, Raymond Lewis was a driving force and said that's actually not the case. So the idea of the program was called the New South Wales Sacred Sites Survey Team. Within 6 months, the name needed to be changed because the old people said it is not a sacred site. If they're sacred, then they have the potential to be dead. What we want them to be is significant, because then they're alive. So the Sacred Site Survey team went to the sites of significance in a very short time. Quick background to living conditions, 1958. This is the space in which my family had returned to Armidale, living on the fringe of a rubbish dump, and appalling conditions. During the 1959-1960, a number of children died due to the poor conditions, and this is considered the town of, at that time, this was the town of schools and churches, particularly in New South Wales, the town of schools and churches, and yet in this community, a little over less than 200 people, several children died, and a young man died because of the living conditions. This is my great grandfather, Frank Archibald, and he's holding an image of his grandfather, a gentleman named Malawangi. Now, we had no idea of Malawangi. We knew of great grandfather, but we knew of a story about a train song. The very first time the train came to Armidale. But of course, as a child, they're all fables. They're all imaginary things that happen somewhere perhaps not in dreams, but they lived in somebody else's mind. So yes, we had this idea that there was this train that came to Armidale. It was a great thing. By the way, that's me next to the great grandfather on the left-hand side, I think, of your screen. So it's about in the mid-60s. Here are some of the language groups in that space that I'm talking about. Now, I'm arguing that there is actually a greater relationship of languages amongst this, and yes, we call it a chain of languages, but the challenge today is to work out how we are in fact connected. Here's that image that I was talking about, the National Parks and Wildlife Service. Frank Archibald in the middle was central to the leadership around the men at the time. He was considered the last of what we would call Grunda, the last of the really senior people. My grandfather, not my biological grandfather, is next to my father, and this is after a process of ceremony where they gave him the ability to go to certain places within the country because of the sense or the perception of the dangerous nature of some of those places. On the left-hand side, he's talking to two other senior men of the Dunghutti people, and he began recording some of those stories and saving them for the future. What he also did at that time was instituted with them old men a leadership program for young boys, taking them to historical sites and to give them a sense of culture and understanding. The idea around the notion that things are sacred and yet significant became very evident in this place here on the left-hand side, because, and tragically even today, some people still think that it's sacred. But this, in fact, was a place of resistance. Told to us by this article here that in the 1860s, over 600 men had come from vast distances to have a conversation, dare I say, a kipara, to have a conversation about the notion of what were they going to do in terms of survival, how were they going to bring about change. So the idea of kipara at this stage for me, at this early learning, I thought, okay, so out there in the we're out there in the danger zone. Because I thought, well, this is where this is where the real danger is here. But I then start to learn that this is about resistance. This is not about mumbo jumbo and the spirits and all this. This is about solid evidence of resistance. And so these old men were talking to us in this fashion. They were talking about the way in which we should operate and act as young men. That we had responsibilities to behave in certain ways in community. So at this time, 1975, Raymond Lewis wrote his very first paper. And it took him the best part of 3 weeks, I understand, to write 2.5 pages. He'd only gone as far as 3rd class, primary. And yet, when I read this paper today, the depth and the strength of the language, whilst it might not sound eloquent and have all the tricks, it is absolutely profound. And it was talking about holding on to cultural ways, but he was also commentating on the universities, that they were in fact taking our material and not returning it to us, or in giving it to us in what he was calling the old grapevine, feeding it back. So at this time he was also talking about this idea of creating knowledge space. And from his paper, From the Kipara to a Cultural Bind, was talking about that freedom of conversation, that freedom of intellectual endeavour, to being bound and having to abide by the rules of the Aboriginal Protection Board and the Aboriginal Welfare Board in New South Wales. Quickly moving on. Going all right, time?
Yep, right.
You'll tell me. Okay. So here's where most of this knowledge is. Let's say through the 80s and the early 90s, all of the language material, all of the cultural, anthropological material, all of that archaeological material finds its way to IATSIS in Canada. Not all of it, but lots of it. It's stored down there. It's the storehouse where people have to go to retrieve a sense of belonging or a sense of knowledge about themselves and their communities. In fact, lots of people are on pilgrimage, lots of people are there searching for family. Lots of people from the stolen generation are there looking to find connections to family in these archives. To some degree, that's what has happened to our people in New South Wales, is that we've had to draw that material out of the archives, and we've done well at that. Lots of people are finding new material and sharing it amongst family. A simple but effective way for me to communicate with my communities about knowledge is just a simple diagram about how this happens for us. But this idea of revaluing, revitalising and renewal was coming from Raymond Lewis during the 1975, obviously with other people who are thinking like-minded, not just in this country, but elsewhere in the world, about renewing a sense of being and a sense of purpose. So that's just my little diagram that framed up my idea for this cultural reawakening. A little song that I was talking to you earlier about was the arrival of the train to Armidale, recorded twice by Frank Article from 2 different sources. And so this is my rendition of the oral recording. And it's basically written in the orthography that I've now developed. And so when I wrote this, or I developed this orthography. It's come from perhaps close on 20 years of actually engaging with these sound files every day, just about every day of my life. I allowed myself the ability to be the learner, not to be somebody who had ideas about what it should be. I listened and said, okay, you tell me, and I've heard this said. And what I was using as the tool was the description by the old people to the linguist. And so when the old people were talking, they were talking in my language as a child. That's that Irish language. And I knew it. I knew intuitively, or perhaps not intuitively, but I knew from a cultural perspective what they were describing. We'll get to the song a little bit later. So what we do know is that his grandfather and his grandmother were standing on the top of the archway of an arch. That's all we know. So for me, it sounds like the song is about a train going up and down a dale. And then during the research, I find the images. They work. So Frank Malawani, his grandmother, let the song sing. So that came, so songs like that are very difficult to drag out. So I've had to go all the way around all of the other data in order to come back and go, okay, that's what they're saying. What happened through the process for me with the work was I had to do the work every day. I had to repeat every day. So in fact, my teacher were the old people on the tape, and my mimicry of that actually allowed me to set free my tongue. What had also happened was that I began to start to engage with my memory. And I remembered the old people would make certain sounds, even when they were talking, that I just was mesmerized and couldn't imagine how they were making. Flaps, trills. Trills are okay, and flaps are a bit more different until you realise that all of it is being devoiced of flappers. And so you start to learn this stuff. I had to do a full circle as well. I had to start to understand what the linguistics terminology was. I wanted to understand what people were trying to describe for me, so that if I wanted to make an argument, I had to have both sides. And I couldn't do that just by simply saying, I think you're wrong. And I think that became a challenge. Anyway, so here I have, on the left-hand side, is a description by a young linguist that I'm working with at the moment, who I'm absolutely, I'm giving permission to do anything he wants from his perspective. He just can't write from there. But I want him to write from himself so that we can have a dialogue. So on the left is this IPA, is it? Yeah. So this is his interpretation of this one little section of one utterance, or two utterances, maybe. But the way that I would pronounce it is Yimbir Magnam Irngara. And so the speed at which these trials are in this language in particular are very, very fast, very rapid. But anyway, we're going to get to, so I had a chance to talk with Russ yesterday. Do you mind if I play Russ is good?
Sure.
About Kenneth Hale. Found his material and then dug it up and said, okay. I read this little, it's the smallest review. I don't know how small reviews can be, but this thing must be written on a cigarette paper. And I realised that inside of what he's written in this short description is two very important pieces. Two very important pieces for me. And so, and that is that he was talking about, which I've called fortition and lenition, but he was called weakening and strengthening of some sort. I realise it's just a play on words now, and so. But I'd come to that conclusion after listening. And then I realised that somebody else has made that determination all those years ago, and yet nobody's picked it up. So I'm still planning the finding of it. Moving forward, that's just the way in which the language work's got to be. But for me, this is the next thing. How do we engage with our universities and our things? Sometimes we've got to create the space where they can come to an apple festival. Let's go over and break bread with the mob. So what we've been doing is we create this space where we can have some serious and honest dialogue. We frame it, we give it colour, we give it, we bring the people, or we decide, we direct all the conversations. So I'll just give you one more look and another image. So we use all of the building. This is our building. It's an enormous building. We've got 5 spaces outside. We take over the grasslands. We call them paddock. It's funny, this crossover of language. Okay, so anyway, that's the essence of the talk. So very quickly, I might just go back to the song if I could just. Okay, I won't do the sound. But it took me a long time to learn to get the mouth working to get that sound. Prana Prolongari, Wangala Gamagi, Wangala Gamango, Narakingu Pishan. Narakingu Pishan, I really had to work hard. And the reason I did that was to honour the old people, but to allow whatever the orthography was to come out. Now, how that's rendered in the future, I don't care, because I've done my bit here and now. So, but that's the idea of it. So what's happening in New South Wales is that we've got this drive for language and culture and heritage, but we've got to make sure that it's much more than just the kipara. Unless the kipara has all of these elements of real serious dialogue. And at the moment we've got this major kipara or this major conversation happening in our country where people are determining whether or not there would be an enshrined voice within within the Constitution of the Australian, within the Australian Constitution. And I'm really disheartened that there's a debate, not so much a debate, there's a running commentary and almost a betting angle going on at the moment. So anyway, look, I'll leave it at that. I just wanted to say thank you to Stephen for bringing or allowing us to come to be a part of this conversation. but really just to thank you all for your bits and pieces over the last couple of days, because it reflects on the conversations and the things that are going on in my head. But to know that there is there's a purpose, I think, for all of us in holding key players. So, thank you.
Discussion. Shay.
Well, first I want to say thank you. That was very interesting and very personal, and I really appreciate you sharing. That was great presentation. I guess I'm sort of curious, why, I don't know, my question is why do you have a linguist that you're working with you, and what maybe is the, reasoning behind that, because it seems like you're, speaking the language and working towards that in some sense anyway, so if you, are having somebody doing transcription for you, I don't know, it might be more beneficial for you to do that yourself in some ways,
it's, there's a two-part to it. There's a young linguist that did my language class last year, who I think is quite brilliant. I want to invest some time and energy with him. I want us to have a working relationship going forward. So we sit and we talk about what he hears versus what I hear. And it would be way too easy for me to just say, no, you're wrong. But I want the engagement to happen. But that quick response, the ability to write the material, interpret, or at least describe it with the IPA. He has that. He can do that in an afternoon. Having problems take me a fortnight.
Right.
So that's what it's about. But it's for me. It's actually sharing the language. I want to be able to share with somebody, particularly at that linguistic space, what that's about. So it isn't about him doing my work, except I'm paying him to do some of my work, but I also want him to have some personal growth as well. He's not ambitious.
Thank you, Joe. I was just curious. That gives me a lot of information too, based on what I presented earlier.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Not what you were saying, but I resonated with you.
Right.
It sort of would be like somebody asking me why I have a linguist or anything.
Well, I've asked you that.
I'm still thinking about it.
Was that one of the comments I never heard of? Translate some of the songs?
Yeah, what was the song that
Oh, yeah. So, understanding where it has come from, it has been around some of these songs. Great grandfather Frank Angel sang a number of songs. But he says things like, that's when the boy got up to ring the bell. Okay? So, I look for this and I go, okay, bell, bell, bearer. Bell, bell, bearer will be Gilero. Okay, so the word for boy, birki, bell, bell, bearer, birki. So the boy, the bell, got up, did boy. The bell, bell is, I don't know what you would call that. A bell ring. Well, a bell ring. To bell a bell. Yeah, so that's what, it just became about that. So what I first did though was I took the word greasy, government, government goal. Now, it could be government goal even, but go and go do the same thing in Dangata. So the government went. So I worked backwards from government, and Wongalagi was the notion of the spinning of the wheels. So you would think that Wongalagi was the wheel, and this has been described by other people as the wheels going around. But Wongala actually means to travel around, to be not necessarily going anywhere, but going somewhere. Wongala, you know. So it means where you going, whereabouts you going around to. Yeah. So basically, that's what it did. I took everything that I knew, and I worked on the things that I worked on the things that I knew, and then I worked on the way in which the language was being described, or the story was being described. So that's when the boy got up to ring the bell to let the train go through, you see. Now, obviously, you would go, well, where's the train going through? Well, this is the train going through. This is the boy getting up. And Beru is to rise. So then you can start putting different tags behind Beru, Bera. And so then you can change it from that to Baira. So these changes have started to adapt to different things. But basically it means to rise. Now the notion of a song is a Baira. I dare say a prayer could be a Baira. But you literally, or to give a speech is Baira. You literally have to rise. So all of this material begins to start to fall out of the corpus, I think. Is that what you would call it, shade, the corpus? So things are falling out everywhere, only because they were able to be seen. But the big tags are the ones in the middle, the more common ones that are everywhere. They're the describers. They're the ones that are telling you what's happening, to who, by who, well actually not by who. It is being done, it will be done. Anyway, so this one is that's this there, which translates to that. This is this do. So you can actually put this one together and turn it back the other way, so it becomes iru uri is that this do doing this. So something that's doing something would be iru uri. So my iru uri, I will be doing something. So it becomes very simple in the end, but I tell you what, it's taken a long time to get to where it is.
Did anybody else find that the song sounded like a train?
Oh yeah, the way the old fellow sang it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it sounded like
yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't, I thought it was.
Yeah, Nariti Kupisha.
Okay,
Yeah, so that's the tempo for it. Kupisha.
And that's the first time I see it.
Okay.
That's the first time you've ever seen
I've
it.
heard it, I guess, okay.
I will just say one thing before I leave though. I've been so inspired by so much of what's gone on in the last couple of days. You know, obviously the strength of being able to have the voice to speak it out, to plan for the future. We've got ideas to take care of this cultural intellect as best we can, knowing that you can't hold things always forever. We want to produce material on paper. The reason for that is to assert and to honour the cultural information of older people, but also to get onto an equal footing with other academics in Australia. I don't want to fight with people, but if you want to have a debate with me, make sure you're ready, because I've got my material to back me up, and that's what the work has been done. I can back up what